MLA Adam Olsen for the Green Party. Welcome to the Islam Unravelled podcast and interview. Thank you for joining us. And for those that are not familiar or don't know your background, if you could perhaps introduce yourself and your role with the BC Greens and the community you represent.
Yeah, so thank you very much for inviting me onto your podcast. I really appreciate this opportunity. I hope to use this opportunity, I think, to continue to learn about the incredible diversity of our province and the people who live in our province. I was born and raised on Sartlip First Nation, Chatlip. It's in the Saanich or Saitnich territory, which is on southern Vancouver Island, on the north part of the Saanich Peninsula. And my riding is Saanich North in the Islands. And so an interesting point is that the provincial riding that I represent is essentially the Canadian half of the territory of the Saitnich people. It's slightly larger, but for all intents and purposes, I am and represent the first person of Saanich ancestry to represent Saanich in the legislature. It's an honor and actually quite humbling to sit in that chair and see Saanich North in the Islands on the nameplate in front of me, recognizing that I have the opportunity to represent this beautiful place that my family on my dad's side has been for since time immemorial. I'm a mixed heritage guy. I've got both Coast Salish ancestry, and as well on my mom's side, I've got German and British ancestry. So I bring a bit of the diversity of the province to the job that I do. However, I am far from knowledgeable when it comes to the beautiful diversity of cultures that are here on this land now.
Absolutely, and Adam, I know the journey to public service. It's a long one. It's a hard one and a difficult journey to get into politics and to represent politically a community and if you could tell me that, what inspired you, like from your life journey to decide to become a public representative in the government?
I have and I've always had a very strong sense of public and community service, of serving our community. And I think it probably came. I grew up in a Christian church, and my grandfather had a big impact on and imprint on my life, and he really believed in loving the people around you and serving them. And so I grew up with grandparents who would welcome strangers into their home for dinner. My grandfather would pick people up who looked like they needed help and would give them a place to stay and feed them. And he was a very loving person and really believed in community service. And when I was about 16 or 17, we had a falling out with the church, I guess is probably the best way of putting it. Some differences of opinion, let's say, and perspectives, and that community of the church, or the church really was our community, and so our family didn't have that anymore. And for the better part of a decade, I would say that we were lost, just in terms of not having that really tight-knit community that I grew up in. And then in 2007, I was approached to run for municipal council in Central Saanich. And just like I'm the first Saanich person to represent Saitnich, I was the first Saanich person to step across the line and run municipally. And I really got a chance to see the community and how I could be a part of the community and how I could serve our community. And so, I really loved that job. 5 years I spent sitting at the council table making decisions about land use and local issues. and was intrigued by the idea of running provincially. There's a whole host of other issues that I think we deal with here in the provincial government. It's a crown government, and so there has a lot to do with the history of this province when it comes to Indigenous relations and Indigenous issues. Can be dealt with much more directly at the provincial level than they can at the municipal level. And so in 2013, I decided to step away from the council table, actually formally resigned my position to run provincially, and ran with the BC Green Party, the party that I think most well reflected the values that I have and the perspectives that I have, and decided to take this next step in my journey to be a provincial representative. And I think it did a few things for me. It provided a good platform for me to serve, and I think that's something that we have to continue to repeat often, that this job is about serving the community rather than serving ourselves or serving our parties. This is about serving. This is how can I serve you and your community and your neighborhood and your region and the province that we live in. And so that's, I think, a common theme between myself and my colleague, Sonia Furstnow, is that we very much value community service. And as well, I think the issues that could be dealt with here at the provincial level were very attractive to me.
And with that example of your grandfather helping those in need, what you realized, even at a seat at the table for the city council representing Saanich and the Saanich peoples, you quickly understood to really meaningfully help people was to be at this table for the province and the provincial government, and to dedicate that service in that regard where the most impact could be to help obviously your community and the greater community on that level. And so I would say you're probably a pride of your community, because that is a great commitment, and taking that example from family and mentors and role models and taking that to the next level in government. And now with the Green parties and values and the values of the Green Party, obviously the environment is the first thing people think about when they think of the BC Greens, but there's a lot more to it. And what are the values alignment from community, the environment? Let's talk about values alignment and other aspects. What drove you to be a part of the Green Party, and where we are with the Green Party for the province of British Columbia?
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's important to recognize that the history of the party and where it came from, and it does start with a very strong connection to environmental activism back in the early 1980s, where the BC Green Party first came, where the Green Party was first established on some issues around forestry, really, and overlogging. And here we are almost 40 years later, still talking about overlogging, and a general lack of respect for some of the most ancient creatures still alive on the planet are those coastal Douglas fir and coastal cedars. So I think that it is important to acknowledge the history of this party was rooted in environmentalism and environmental activism. However, I think that it has been a struggle for the party or part of our, I shouldn't say a struggle, part of our work and our responsibility now as leaders within this party is to introduce British Columbians to the diversity of perspectives that we have. And I think, one of the most interesting things is we often get criticized by longtime Greens that we don't talk about climate change enough, and we don't talk about environmental activism enough, but for example, just in this past week, my colleague Sonia and I have been talking a lot about the mental health crisis that's ongoing in the province. Last week, we were talking about the public health crisis that COVID-19 has caused. And I think that it's important to recognize the party is well rooted in a number of other principles as well. And those include a real strong commitment to participatory democracy and ensuring that the government and the governance that we have here is truly representative of the people. And I think it came through in my previous answer where I was saying we share a value of service. And I think this is a universal value. Doesn't matter where you come from in the world, there's very strong values around service and serving our community. And I think that making sure that our institutions here, government institutions, are representative of people, and that the people that are elected to represent have the community that elected them at the center of their work, rather than political affiliation or otherwise. We have a very strong value when it comes to a respect for diversity, and one of the really challenging aspects of this party is that the membership and the traditionally the membership of this party has not been diverse. It has been very much a party of one type of people, let's just say. And I would just say, people who have been interested in environmental activism. And we have a responsibility, and we have it clearly in front of us, as Sonia and I have talked about this a lot, about reaching out and building relationships, genuine relationships with diverse groups and diverse peoples with diverse backgrounds and beliefs in our province, because that, we can have the value of respect for diversity, but if this party doesn't reflect the beautiful diversity in this province, then we are not doing our job. And so I think that's an area that admittedly we could do much better on, and admittedly I think we are doing much better on, but we still got a long journey and a long road to go on that. And another, I think, important value that we have is not as a value of nonviolence. And I think that we recognize that the way that we improve the world around us is to embrace people in a nonviolent, engage people in dialogue rather than in physical or psychological violence. And so I think that it's important. It's an important value that we hold up, and that we have to continue to ensure that we're creating safe places for people to engage and have discussions about how their world is working and how their world can work better. And that is a really important value of ours as well.
Absolutely. And as you're aware, with the diversity in British Columbia and this podcast, the Islam Unravelled podcast, and the Muslim community of British Columbia is comprised of many ethnic and cultural backgrounds from various communities in Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Europe. And so although the religion is the common denominator amongst these races and cultures and people of color, of different colors, again, coming to Canada, and this is the land of our First Nations brothers and sisters, and we are on this land. And Columbus, when he came, he thought this was India, and calling the First Nations people Indians because he thought he hit India. And now my families are originally from the Indian subcontinent, and we've actually, incidentally, my great grandfather came in 1904 to Aberdeen, Washington, and they came up to British Columbia. And so there's a rich history, but not merely the history of the thousands of years of a great history and a great culture of First Nations people with the great spirit and living off the land, and even the concept of land ownership, which colonialists brought in to, in essence, right from the ground, divide and rule. Whereas with First Nations peoples that was use what you need from season to season at different grazing areas, and I've always in my reading of various fiction and non-fiction books about North American history, I've always admired the connection and the culture of First Nations people with the land and with respect for the wildlife and by that holistic kind of life of using what you need. So there's not that current culture in the West where it's the profit and the bottom line above all, and whether the climate issues become a low priority, community issues become a low priority to the dollar. It goes back to what is more civilized? What was a more civilized way of life and culture? And so, with our First Nations community and the communities you represent in Saanich and the Tsartlip Nation, perhaps let's talk about the culture and how the culture of the community kind of informs the work, because it seems like that alignment, probably in terms of where the Greens are with diversity, and now that we are here together as multiple countries and multiple ethnicities and multiple beliefs, how we can all kind of meet one another, like in this forum, where our audience is largely a Muslim community here in British Columbia and Canada, to really connect with our friends and neighbors. And there's in our holy book we call the Quran, there's a verse that says Allah created us from different nations and different tribes so that we may come to know one another. If we were all the same color, the same beliefs, it'd be kind of boring. So I'm sure there's a wisdom in our respective races and beliefs to come together and appreciate each other and get to know each other like we're doing on this podcast. So please talk about the culture of our great First Nations hosts and really how that informs, again, your value system and alignment with the Green Party.
Yeah, I think if we take a look at the world, if we start with this beautiful planet that we live on, Earth, that we all share, and that sustains us and provides us with life sustenance and allows us to have these wonderful conversations and these wonderful differences. I think it's important to acknowledge the incredible diversity that occurs naturally in nature. And as we start to see the removal of species or the extinction of species and the lack of biodiversity, that actually this planet becomes ill, it becomes sick, and it doesn't function as well. It functions much better with variety and with diversity. And I would say the same thing for humanity, is that there's so many different peoples and there's so many different beliefs, and while on one hand it has caused us as a species and the world, frankly, great pain and great challenges over the years, it also creates great beauty. And I think that one of the biggest challenges that we have is kind of navigating the fact that much of the culture that we live in today focuses on difference, focuses on how we're different and how we can divide and how we can and why you're different than me and why I'm different than that other person over there. And I think that while we focus on our differences, we can then, start to kind of say, well, we're better than them, or they're worse than us, or look at those people are lesser than these people. And I think, one of the great tragedies of North America is that when the Europeans showed up here, they created, and they did this everywhere in their colonization of the world, is that they created a hierarchy of humans. These humans are better than those humans, and those humans are lesser than us, and that's the culture that has been rooted in this government institution. And this is the conversation that I'm having day in and day out about systemic bias, discrimination, and racism that exists in this colonial institution that I'm a representative of. The culture that I come from and the culture that I'm still very, very much neophyte. I still have so much to learn in the Husseinich culture. If I learned every day for the rest of my life, I would still know very, very little about. I would know little about nothing probably, but nonetheless, some of the teachings that I have learned is that we are no greater or no worse than any other species that is existing in this place. We are part of it. We're part of the world, and it's this separation of humans and everything else that I think has been such a disaster in our modern world, where we elevate ourselves as being this noble and intelligent species, and yet everything we do lays waste to our own home. It seems to make little sense. The culture that I am learning about for the Saanich people is that those species are they're our relatives. They are and the stories that we hear, like about salmon, for an example, in Senchothan, in the indigenous language of the Saanich people, Senchothan, it's called. Those people are the salmon are called Staitnuch, and each species has their own, or each there's Thaki and Quotlu and Hanin and Daitwin. Those are Coho, Chum, Humpback, and Sockeye salmon. Those stories about how those salmons came to be is a story of transformation from humans into that species. And the story of the creator is that the creator came onto the land and was looking for the hardest working people, and he turned them into the salmon, and gave a responsibility to both the salmon and the human to say, you look after them and they will look after you. And this is the contract that I think has been so broken over the last number of decades, is since we stopped looking after the salmon, they stopped looking after us, and vice versa. So there is a completely different relationship between human beings and everything else in our world. And I think that part of what I've tried to do as the first person who has any connection to this culture, even a tiny connection that I have, in terms of my knowledge base, I've tried to share those perspectives to say the cedar, or the chapet, they're called, it's the kind people. These are the people that the cedar tree will give its the clothes right off its back, its bark, and you can take planks from a cedar and it will heal itself up. These are the people that continue to sacrifice, and when you hear these stories, you start to recognize that there is a way for us to live on this planet with all of these other species, rather than as the species that just continues to take and take and take and give very little of value back. And so part of what we need to do is a massive cleaning of this colonial institution's house. It's a big spring cleaning that's needed in this place, both from the perspectives of where resources and where our perspectives flow. Everything in this province has been designed to flow to the benefit of the crown. And what needs to happen here now is we need to move away from that colonial perspective and to ensure that everything flows to the benefit of this place that we represent, whether it be the humans here or nature, and nature. And we have some incredible teachings that have been here, as you've highlighted, for thousands of years. But we have some incredible teachings that have been here since 1904, that we could learn from as well. Some beautiful teachings from our Muslim brothers and sisters, and from our Baha'i brothers and sisters and from our Buddhist brothers and sisters. These teachings that come to us have so many commonalities in them that if we opened our hearts and minds to them, we could hear them and see them. We would be a much better society than the one that we have right now, which is those people bad, these people good, those people we listen to, these people we chastise, and that's the way that I think we've got a situation where vast aspects of our society are dominated by few. It's the aspects and the values of social justice in our party is another. You asked about the principles earlier, but it's another important principle of our party in creating a just society, one that treats people equally, whether it doesn't matter ethnic background, religious beliefs, gender. Your identity is a big topic right now that I think is an important one. That we open our arms wide and embrace all of the diversity and all of the ideas that can come when we open our minds to that. Closed minds are very, very dangerous in our society because good ideas come from all corners everywhere. And so I think that this is the next evolution of our society, and one that I think will give us the foundation that we can build on to be able to survive the really big challenges that we have in the decades to come.
Agreed. And you brought up something in these parallels. There's our rich diversity of human beings, of colors and cultures, and our cultures and cultures represent even language and cuisine and rituals, and then to relate it with biodiversity and how diverse our ecosystem is with our and I like the relationship that you brought up with wildlife and with animals, and that they're species, and for us to treat them as products and sources for our own consumption, rather than a relationship as we would have with our own brother and sister or our own community. And because we are different, and biodiversity is different, there's so many different aspects to our natural habitat, and how we can get along as human beings and appreciate the richness of belief and cultures without imposing our beliefs and cultures and issues on each other, but by appreciating one another, respecting one another's space and beliefs and customs, and how that comes together, and also in relation to the environment and wildlife. I like the parallels that if we can get ourselves together as human beings, appreciating one another in this brotherhood and sisterhood, and then appreciating nature and wildlife in the same fashion, then that is a foundation for a path forward. That is something that we could really unite humanity on. And I know it may be a utopian kind of thing, but I really, what I learned from you today was nature and wildlife is as important to the relationships we have amongst human beings, and that is a powerful message. And it's not one or the other, or some sort of zero-sum game. We have to take care of our environment as we take care of our environment of relationships. Now, that being the case, we have an event coming up on the 21st, which is the United Nations Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and you graciously agreed to join us representing the Sanish peoples, the First Nations people of the Charlotte Nation, and your community. And and then we have members of the Black community, we have members of the Chinese Asian community, members of the Muslim community from the subcontinent, and other rich backgrounds to come together. As we know, a lot of our communities typically are siloed, whereas for different reasons, Muslims will kind of rally around issues regarding with Islamophobia. The Jewish community will rally around issues around anti-Semitism, and Black community will rally around issues about Black racism, First Nations, about First Nations discrimination. But what affects one affects us all, and by coming together, representing our various communities and races and beliefs in one forum together, that hey, we are one, and really we can stand for our own specific tribe, our own specific group, or we can stand for one another, and that, hey, to protect our community means we have to protect our other communities, and call out injustice for what it is, call out racism for what it is, and call out systemic racism for what it is. And so I wanted to maybe just close on maybe looking forward to this next few days when this event will come together, and we are working on confirming the BC Human Rights Commissioner to join and speak as well. So please, let's close with that, bringing folks together from all backgrounds and races in this way of solidarity together to be with one another, hold each other's hands, and say, hey, we're one, we're together.
Well, and I really thank you for the invitation, and I thank you for the invitation to participate in this podcast, and the introduction to you, and to the opportunity to get to know you and to get to know your culture better. I would say one of the great sadnesses that I have just in general is that the division between peoples and cultures has established a general, I think, sense of fear in society, that with the fear of the unknown, and fear and a lot of the stories, fear of each other, fear of making mistakes. It would be wrong for me to not acknowledge that I came into this podcast really hoping that I didn't make a mistake today. But I would love to be able to sit with the Muslim community and not fear just messing up a little bit, because there's a lot that I don't know, and I think the same thing goes with sitting with my elders in my own culture, in my own Saanich culture. To say that I'm an imperfect human. I'm gonna come and sit at this table, and I'm not gonna know things I don't know, but yet we're all kind of just sitting there ready to pounce on the person for making the. And I think one of the real challenges that we face as we go forward here is that while we are opening up and creating and hopefully creating a world that's more just and with our arms open to embrace people, that it cannot be done also with a sense of fear around making mistakes and kind of, we're going to step in it every now and then, and it's not going to be comfortable, and we're going to have to be prepared to make the apology and prepared to take a step back and humble ourselves and say, look, there's a learning opportunity for me. And I've always operated in my life that, to provide people the opportunity to ask any question, as long as there's no malice in their heart when they ask that question. If it's out of ignorance, or if it's out of pure curiosity, ask me the question. I'll do my best to answer it. But if I sense malice, then there's a different thing there. And so I really appreciate this opportunity to participate. And I really think that if we can create safe places for people to have these cultural exchanges and these learning opportunities, and that we can treat each other with compassion and love, and say, yeah, you know what, there's stuff that we don't know about each other, and if we approach this with sincerity and humility, then we're going to actually be able to learn from each other, and we're going to be able to learn from our cultures, and there's going to be a greater we will evolve into a greater human society, because the diversity will allow us to see multiple perspectives, that this is a multi-dimensional world that we live in, and each of us brings a different dimension to that. And so, I guess for me, my real hope for humanity is that we can get past this point in which everybody is looking to expose where people make the mistakes, or where people have maybe walked too closely to a line, and where we say, look, we're creating safe places for us to have these exchanges, and as long as you're participating in that place in a safe way and with a genuine heart and soul and mind, then we can welcome people into that conversation, and I think that's my hope for my part of the participation in the event coming up. But I really do look forward to the future days of this relationship, where we can continue these conversations and learn from each other, and learn how to embrace our diversity, and learn how to love each other as humans on this planet, in an effort to learn how to love this planet in a different way than we have over the last century or two, as we've taken a perspective that everything is here for us to commodify, everything is here for us to turn into an economic, into a number, for some to generate wealth, and others to be serving that wealth generation. So there it is. I mean, I think if we can create these spaces and continue to create these relationships, I think we're all going to be much, much better for it. And I appreciate you reaching out and inviting me into your space here.
Absolutely, and just echoing your sentiment, love, respect, and justice for all. I think this is what we aspire to, and I will say I was afraid of making mistakes as well coming in. I didn't want to say anything because I have such a respect for First Nations culture, and I wanted to ensure, and that was my concern going in. So I think we shared that. So on that note,
well,
Adam,
I'll say this, I'll say this. It's not a bad idea for us, part of that humility piece. It's not a bad idea for us to feel a little nervous. I mean, I think it's important. This is where we say, okay, like, this is where we can create the space between us and say, okay, I can fully respect the fact that I'm walking into the unknown. So the nervousness is not a bad deal, but I'm glad that I walked into a conversation and your arms were open as wide as mine.
Absolutely, Adam, a brother in humanity, and I really enjoyed our conversation, and looking forward to talking to you soon. And we'll see you on our event on the 21st. Thank you, my friend.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye-bye.